Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the North Andover Board of Health meeting. It's Thursday, January 18th, 2018, and I call the meeting to order. Please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to skip over the approval of minutes, old business and new business right now, and we're going to go straight down to communication, announcements, and discussion. I do want to say that I am delighted. We have a guest speaker tonight, and Caroline is going to introduce her. Her name is Erica, and she starts out our Department of Health educational series for 2018. Our professional series to give information on areas of concern to a greater population, which is what public health is. So I'm going to ask Caroline to please introduce our guest.
Sure. So Erica and I have been in touch for a few weeks now, a little over a month. We started working with the library, and we're trying to roll out a health education lecture series. We figured January would be a good kickoff to the first session by having nutrition, since everyone's looking to kind of tweak some things with their eating. So Erica spoke at the library last week, and she was fantastic. We had a good turnout, and we asked her to come back and speak tonight. So, and she works for Nutrition in Motion. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So, like Caroline just mentioned, I work for Nutrition in Motion right here in North Andover, very close by to you all. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about meal planning and volumetrics. So meal planning, I'm sure everyone has heard of before. Volumetrics, maybe not. Volumetrics is a bit of a new movement, so to speak. There's a bunch of great science to it, and there's also a bunch of phony stuff to it. So tonight we're only going to talk about the science and the stuff that really helps people with meal planning and becoming truly full when they are trying to diet in some way or make a sort of lifestyle change. So tonight we are going to talk about, Tonight we're going to start by talking about the macronutrients. Can anyone tell me what the three macronutrients...
You want me to sit over there? I'll click for you and
this
your clicker a little...
should be good.
Okay.
It should be good. Can anyone tell me what the three macronutrients are? Any ideas? They're right up there. They're the proteins, carbohydrates, and then the fats and lipids. So some of you might know exactly what this is, and this might look completely new to all of you. The reason why we're starting with this slide here is just to talk a little bit about what these nutrients are and where they go. So before we start talking about the meal planning, we're going to talk about what nutrients go into our meal planning, or what macronutrients. So proteins, carbs, and fats. Why am I showing you this big, huge, crazy diagram? The purpose of this is to show you how we turn those nutrients, or those macronutrients, into energy. That's the whole purpose for why we eat. Everything we eat turns into energy. Our body uses it somehow. Now, if you look up here, the green sort of pathway, or metabolic pathway for carbohydrates, it goes in a nice straight down flow. It's nice and clear. It goes all the way down to the citric acid cycle, which essentially is how we get energy. Now, on the other hand, if you look to the opposing sides for proteins and then fats and lipids, they have to go through a bit more work. Now, the purpose of this is to show that low carbohydrate diets do not work. That's because we need carbs for energy. If we cut carbs out completely, at least for the average person, not on a specific or a specified diet like the ketogenic or something like that, for the average person, when we cut out carbohydrates, our body has to go through a little bit more work to get energy. They have to turn the proteins and turn the fats and lipids into energy, into carbohydrates, before they can turn them into energy. Now, usually, we can do this. Our body does do it on a daily basis, but it's just a little bit more work. So this is just showing where those nutrients come from, how we get them into energy, and how we need carbohydrates. Okay, so what are carbohydrates? Just as I mentioned before, they're the primary source of energy. They provide nutrients also for the bacteria in your gut. Has anyone heard of prebiotics or probiotics? Right? Very common. People hear about them all the time. A lot of people hear about probiotics a little bit more often than pre. Carbohydrates are sort of like the fuel or the energy for the probiotics to work. It feeds the gut, so we need good carbohydrates in our body. portion size is also a huge concern when it comes to carbs. A lot of people find that when they see a huge plate of pasta or a bunch of carbs in front of them, portion control goes out the window. Sometimes using our hands is an easy way just to have a good sense of how much we are eating. A fist is about a cup. A large fist is about a cup and a half, just for general knowledge when you are eating or sitting at a table with carbs in front of you. Okay, not all carbs are created equal. I'm sure everyone has heard about processed carbohydrates, or at least the word processed, right? Processed isn't anything new. Now, the carbohydrates that we want to eat are the ones that are natural. So they come in from fruits, they're in vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy. And they also contain fiber. That's super, super important for carbs. Fiber is very important for our GI motility and for also cholesterol levels, which we'll talk a little bit later on. Okay, blood sugar control. So I'm sure everyone in here has heard about, either they've talked about it with their doctor or they've known about it in the past or the future, a little bit about diabetes, right? Something we all know about. So blood sugar control, carbohydrates, and diabetes are all very closely related. Now, when we have carbohydrates, right, so say you just had a huge big plate of pasta, some bread on the side, a glass of milk, okay? That's a huge whole bunch of carbs. Now, what happens to our blood sugar right after we eat that? Spikes super, super high. It follows that red trend. But what happens right after if we have no protein or no fat with that meal? Do we feel awesome an hour later and full and satiated and can move on for the rest of the day? Probably not. What happens is our blood sugar drops even lower. Spikes really high, drops very low. That's when we get the shakes. We want to eat anything and everything we can see in front of us, and we're absolutely starving. So that drop or that scoop after we've had those carbs, that's reactive or rebound hypoglycemia. That's that really low blood sugar. We want to try to avoid that at all costs. When we avoid that and we pair our carbohydrates with proteins and with fats, we're more satiated after meal times. We don't go for those snacks. We're not starving and overeat and take these huge, huge, large portion sizes in. Okay, now proteins. Proteins are also very, very important for numerous different things. Now, I feel like most people hear proteins and they think muscle, right? That's almost the immediate reaction. I need to take in as much protein as I can so I can build up my muscles. Yes, that is true, but there's also a whole bunch more that goes into it. Our body tissues need it. They produce enzyme and hormones. They help with enzymes, and they're also important for transporting nutrients around the body. A lot of our nutrients need proteins, or what proteins turn into, in order for them to be transported in and throughout the body. Now, what kind of protein should we be choosing? That's the hard part, right? So we all know what protein is. So we know it's a lot of meats. We have it in some of our dairy products. And we also have a lot of vegan or vegetarian options for protein as well. We have those in legumes. We have it in some of our grains like a quinoa or a farro. Those have protein as well. So it's not just animal sources. But up here I just have a few examples of portion sizes for some of those food items. Again, we can use our hands just like for carbs for portion size. So about a deck of cards or the palm of your hand is about 3 ounces. 3 ounces is usually about a portion size of meat for a piece of fish, or if it's a piece of steak, something along those lines. Okay, a couple more examples. So just like we mentioned, just like I had just mentioned, some dairy products and also eggs. So eggs are a great source of protein. Now, question, is dairy just protein, or is it also something else? Does it have any other macronutrients in it? Anyone know? Yes, it does. It also has sugar in it, and sugar is carbohydrate. So dairy is also a carbohydrate. Now, dairy also has fat. It also has a little bit of fat in there, which makes it all 3. It has all 3 macronutrients in it. Sometimes people forget and they think, okay, dairy protein or dairy carb, but it has a little bit of everything, just something to keep in mind. Okay, like those vegetarian sources of protein. So if you're trying to avoid red meats, or if you're not really into chicken or shrimp or any of those fishes, there are also a bunch of options you can try. Beans, lentils, nut butters, seeds even, sunflower seeds, pepitas or pumpkin seeds, those are also great sources of protein. So you can get it from anything. It's a complete myth that if you're vegetarian, you're lacking protein. You can get your protein. It's just about paying attention to it in meal planning so you have a lot of options. Yes?
The protein that we get from red meat versus the protein that you're talking about now, is one at all in any way healthier, even though it's protein, is one healthier than the other? So is the vegan's protein going to be equivalent to the meat eater's protein in the long run?
So healthier, not necessarily, but there is something called a complete protein. So when we get protein from an animal source, it contains all of the amino acids versus only some of the amino acids in a vegan source. Now, if you're taking in a vegan source or a vegetarian source of protein, if you're having multiple within a day, chances are you're still going to get all of those amino acids. Maybe not in one sitting. So in long grand scheme of things, if you are having a well-balanced vegan diet, you can get just the correct amount of protein versus having an animal-based diet. But if you're just sticking to one or two of the vegan options, then you most likely will be slightly lacking in protein. So variety is very, very important for a vegetarian diet. Okay, the last macronutrient we have is fats, or our fats. Huge myth in the 90s or the early 2000s, no fat. So we need fat. That's a huge myth. If something ever says non-fat on it, put it down and walk away. You want fat in your diet. It's just about getting the good or the healthy fats. Does anyone know what the good or healthy fats are? Any ideas of what they're called or even a food source example?
Mediterranean diet.
Yes, so what do you think of, or what food item do you think of when you hear Mediterranean diet?
Olives.
Olive oil.
Olive oil, yes.
Almonds.
Almonds, yes. Fish.
Hummus.
Not so, not so
I
much.
love hummus.
Hummus is in the diet, but not so much a healthy fat. But yes. So what's in those items like the fish and the nuts are poly and mono unsaturated fats. Those are the great fats we want in our diet. Other sources of those are avocados, walnuts, flax seeds. Those are all great sources of healthy fat. So why do we want healthy fat? Why is it so important? Less inflammatory, yes. And how does it make us feel? It makes us feel very full. Fat is where our satiety comes from. So when we have a diet that is completely lacking in fat, or a very low fat diet, which a lot of people were doing in the early 2000s and 90s trying to lose weight, low fat, non-fat diet. Problem was most people were starving all the time. Constantly hungry, feeling like they had to have a bunch of meals every couple of hours, constantly wanting to graze or snack. So that's why fat is so important. It's also important for nutrient utilization. So a lot of our nutrients or our vitamins and minerals need fats in order to be properly digested, specifically A, D, E, and K. So in order for us to absorb those nutrients and actually use them, we need a little bit of fat in our diet. A study was done a little while ago where they had 3 separate groups and each had a salad with different types of dressing. One was non-fat, one was part fat, and the other was full fat. Now, what happened was the group that had no fat absorbed minimal, under 20% of the nutrients in that salad. The medium group absorbed a little bit of a higher number, around 70%. The full fat, even more, closer to the 90s. We need the fat to absorb those nutrients. It also provides us energy in the absence of carbohydrates. So just like that big first diagram on the first slide, we can get our energy from fat. So when we don't get energy from carbs, or when we're lacking carbs after we use up all of them for energy, say you're working out, you use up all of your immediate energy for carb, we're going to start using our fat. Fat is also a source of energy. It also makes our food taste good. It makes it a little bit softer. It gives it that smooth taste that we're programmed to enjoy. Okay, so what kinds of fats have those poly and monounsaturated fats? Just like you all mentioned, olives and olive oil, salad dressing when it has olive oil in it as well, avocados, nuts and seeds, nut butters like peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, any of those are all great options. But the catch with fat is that it's very energy dense. Now what that means is that per calorie, there's a couple more grams in it versus carbs and protein. So carbs and protein have about 4 calories per gram. Now on the other hand, fat's closer to about 9. All that means is that in one serving size of fat, if you take a cup of a fat source and compare it to a cup of a protein or a cup of a carb, you're getting more energy out of it. So more calories, essentially. There's just a little bit more to it. So that's why sometimes when you have a couple handfuls of those almonds as you're driving and you look down on the back of the package and you realize you just had 400 calories worth of food. Now, I'm not recommending calorie counting by any means, but it's just to explain that you can have a whole lot in a very short period of time because they are so energy dense. Okay, the Volumetrics eating plan. So keep in mind I mentioned there is a bit of phoniness to it, which most likely was whatever was in this magazine. But we are going to talk about how Volumetrics can be used when you are meal planning and you are trying to diet or make a nice lifestyle change. So what is volumetrics? It talks about the energy density, like I just mentioned, the 4 calories per gram versus the 9. And it talks about the physical weight in grams of food. So on average, women and men consume slightly different amounts of food. So men usually consume about 5 pounds per day, whereas women only consume about 3. That's just the weight. That's not taking calories or nutrient content into account at all whatsoever. Now, when people consume a bunch of food, a whole bunch of food density-wise or physically-wise that has low energy density in it, they feel hungry very soon after. Whereas if someone had a smaller portion of food that had higher energy density, they're going to feel full a lot faster. Does that make sense? Okay.
So if I have a half a peanut butter sandwich
Yes.
with strawberry jelly, that satisfies, forget the jelly part, but that really does satisfy my hunger.
It would, because there's a
does.
lot of fat in there, healthy
Yeah.
fats. Exactly. So what is this energy density besides those?
What I don't know the right word, creates this sense of fullness? It's not a mass effect, like if you eat this much of a energy dense or an energy less dense food, a certain amount of it, 1 cup of one or the other, you don't feel the same degree of fullness in a short time from one or the other then?
So say if one meal is a bunch of popcorn and you have 6 cups of it, you can have 6 cups of popcorn and 1 cup of peanuts to feel the same fullness. So if you were to only have 1 cup of that popcorn and 1 cup of the peanuts, you'd feel very full after having just the peanuts, and you'd still be starving after having the popcorn. Does that answer your question? Okay, so this will explain it a little bit more. So it's the calorie per gram in a serving of food. So something that has low energy density, like a popcorn, there are less calories in, say, a cup. So we can increase the weight, so we can have more of it and feel full. Example, soup broths, fruits, veggies, and popcorn. Now, high energy density foods, like those nuts and seeds, things that have fats, have more calories, so we have less of them to feel the same amount of fullness. Dried fruit also, so that's something to keep in mind. Dried fruit and fruit, totally different things. When we take all of the liquid and all of the fluid, the water, and even some of the fiber out of our fruits, they become more energy dense because we shrink the size of them, but they have the same amount of calories. So that's why they taste so good and they're so sweet. It's almost like having candy.
So would energy dense, high calorie, I'm thinking of hikers. They'll go overnight and they might have the, not an MRE, but these bars that have 1,500 calories or 1,800 calories in this bar, and I don't know what it's made of, but I mean, that's your whole day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably packed with a bunch of all of those healthy fats and
Okay.
proteins more so than a simple carbohydrate. It's probably complex of all 3 of the macronutrients because there's so much in that teeny little bit. That's a perfect example.
Okay.
Okay, wheat thins versus strawberries. Let's talk about what some of the differences are here. Which one do you think is more energy dense, first of all?
Wheat thins.
The wheat thins. Now, what makes something more energy dense versus less energy dense, which we just talked about? What do the strawberries have that the wheat thins don't?
Sugar.
Sugar, yes.
Sugar and water. And
Water.
fiber.
Water and fiber. So wheat thins have minimal nutrients whatsoever. I always give this little story. In our office, we had a box of wheat thins and we did a little experiment. We opened it up, kept it open, and left it on our little kitchenette in our office. A month went by, 2 months went by, 3 months went by. Someone went over and opened up and looked in the box. No mold, no browning. They were barely even stale. And 3 months had gone by and the box was open. There's no food in that food, just to go to show. But on the other hand, strawberries, you leave them for 3 days and they're already gone bad. The point of this is just to show that when we have something like a cup of strawberries, we'll have about 2 cups of it and we'll start to feel the weight of the water and everything in our stomach. Now, with the Wheat Thins, we could probably sit and watch TV and be eating Wheat Thins, eat the entire box, and feel like nothing's even happening. But because they are so processed, the energy density is pretty high. So we're eating a bunch of it, it feels like we're eating nothing, and all of a sudden we've consumed all these crazy calories in processed food and had no idea. So fruit is always something you want to lean more towards in this example because there's fiber and water and nutrients to make us feel that satiety instead of completely ignoring it. Okay, now what decreases energy density? Fiber, like we just said, that was in it, the water, and also air. So when we whip things or we put a bunch of air into our food when we're cooking it, just like popcorn, that air creates a little bit of space in our stomach. It's physically there. It goes with it as we chew it down into your stomach. That decreases the energy density and allows us to eat a little bit more of it or create a larger portion size. Now, on the other hand, there are factors that increase energy density, just like dehydrating our fruits. Once we pull all of that water out, that small piece of fruit has now become very high in energy density. Same thing with processing, all of those chips and popcorns and candy-coated items, and fat, but not the good fat that we talked about. Does anyone know what the bad fats are? So we said mono and polyunsaturated was good, so what's one of the bad ones?
Trans fats.
Trans fats, yes. If you pick up anything in the grocery store and see trans fat on the back, put it back down and run in the other direction. That is one that you do not want any of. Now, what's the other one that's in some of our healthy foods?
Saturated fats.
Saturated fats. Now, some of our dairy products, even coconut oil, has a whole bunch of saturated fat in it. Not something you want to completely cut out of your diet, but something you want to be conscious of. We don't want a lot of it. We only want enough so that it's in our diet, but if it starts to get a little high, then we can run into some problems. But trans fat, you want absolutely none. So back to increasing energy density, when you see that golden layer over any of your food, whether it's Chinese food, French fries, fast food, your energy density is shooting through the roof. So that has a lot of saturated fat, sometimes a lot of trans fat as well. We want to stay away from that stuff.
Not being judgmental about trans fats, just by the way.
Okay. So little activity. Any idea what order all of these fall into? So which one has the lowest energy density or lower amount of calories, and which one has the highest amount of calories?
Lowest would be grapes, wouldn't it?
Almost. There's one even lower.
Plain popcorn.
Popcorn. Then comes
Raisins
grapes.
is pretty high, right?
I'm sorry?
The raisins, I think, would be the highest.
Yep. Not quite the highest.
M&M's?
Fat
Sunflower
and
seeds.
sugar in the same cake.
So we have popcorn is the lowest.
It's in the order that it's given.
Then comes grapes. Then comes raisins. Then comes M&Ms, and then comes nuts and sunflower seeds. They are so energy dense. M&Ms and sunflower seeds, very, very comparable. Almost the same, but nuts just barely beat them. Okay, now what about sides? Which one do we think is the highest?
Mac and cheese.
I like mashed potatoes.
Stuffing. Stuffing is a hidden high calorie item. Stuffing comes first, then mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, rice, and then our green beans. So, just something to keep in mind. Our stuffing is one that most people don't usually get. Okay, pasta primavera. How do we lower energy density with foods that we love? So a lot of people love pasta primavera. What can we do to make it a little bit better? Or to lower that energy density? What do we
Put
take
more
away?
vegetables and reduce the amount of pasta.
Perfect. So you take away some of that pasta, and then we add in more vegetables. You don't have to cut out your favorite foods, just modify them slightly. Now, there's also a slight difference in there with the sauce. Any idea what it is?
Fat and no fat.
Not quite, but we're taking away that cream sauce. So that is a lot of fat. But it's not the good fat. The cream sauce has a lot of that saturated fat, and it's very, very heavy and very energy dense.
What if you dilute it with whiskey, though?
That's a whole nother issue. So for the
She'll get into alcohol later.
we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Now, these are individual opinions only.
So for the cream sauce, when we take that away and we put in a lighter sauce that's mostly oil-based, like an olive oil sauce or a red wine sauce, white wine sauce, you could put that in. It lightens it up just a little bit.
I'm ready to adjourn the meeting and go eat dinner.
It does sound very good.
Drinks.
Even red sauce is slightly better energy density-wise than white sauce. With red sauce, we have to be careful when we're purchasing it to make sure that sugar content isn't through the roof. Same thing with sodium.
So is it true that when you can go to the grocery store and get, we'll call a full cream and sort of this light cream, is that sort of a step down, or is that a bit of a fallacy?
So when it comes to, we'll talk a little bit about the difference between light and low fat and all of that, but with dairy products, low fat dairy is a good idea. That's not a gimmick, so to speak. When you see low fat dairy, it just means there's a little bit less of the bad stuff. Now, dairy is a very controversial topic at the moment. There are a lot of differing opinions based off of gut health and allergies and intolerance, and so to speak, but generally speaking, without taking that into account at the moment, light dairy products are better than full-fat dairy products for the average person. Okay, so another look at calorie density. So this is just some examples of the density of some of our vegetables, some of our pastas, oats, putting them into order. So non-starchy vegetables. Anyone know what some examples of non-starchy veggies are? Any guesses?
It's like your greens, like
Yeah, all your greens. Spinach, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, those are all non-starchy vegetables. Yes, they have tons of fiber and lots of water. Now, on the other hand, we have starchy vegetables. What do we love on Thanksgiving?
Potatoes.
Potatoes, mashed potatoes, those are a starchy veggie. See, sweet potatoes and white potatoes, all potatoes are starchy vegetables. What else?
Rice would be starchy.
Rice is starchy, yep. Corn, and then there's a green one. Peas. So those are the big starchy vegetables. So those are the ones that have more calorie content. Those are a little bit heavier. But our non-starchy vegetables are pretty light. Those are only about 30 to 40 calories per cup. I tell all of my clients, you can have a plate this big of non-starchy vegetables all day, every day. Your weight will not move a single pound. Non-starchy vegetables are great for you. They have tons of fiber, tons of nutrients, and they are just perfect for your body. There's nothing you need to worry about if you're on a diet. Add those in when you're hungry. Snack on them whenever you'd like. When we get to fruits, because there is some sugar in there, they start to go up a little bit. So we get in the 80-90, low fat or fat-free milk, a little bit higher, yogurt, a little bit more because there is some protein, carb, and fat in there. Sweet or white potato, a little bit higher, beans, pasta, oats, and so on and so forth. Now, oats kind of surprise people sometimes. Those are pretty high. Those are at about 300, even higher than some pastas. They're very energy dense. Just something to keep in mind. They are great for breakfast, though. We want that energy density in the morning. We want more food in the morning. We want to pile it up, get all of our carbs, protein, and fats to start the day because our body needs it throughout the day. Okay, so when we're choosing protein, we want to choose the lean sources of protein. So what does lean mean?
Less fat.
Less fat, less of the bad fat. So a lot of animal products have the saturated fat in it. So you want to have less saturated fat and go for the lean options like turkey or chicken or a lean cut of beef. Now, when we're eating our fat, we want to make sure we measure it because of that high density. So when you're having nuts, nut butters, salad dressings, and cooking oils, we need them. They're part of a healthy diet. Just measure them to make sure you're not going overboard all the time without even knowing. Also, pre-portioned snack foods. So why do I say that?
So you don't eat the whole box.
You don't eat the whole box. What happens when you're sitting and watching TV and there's a bag of Oreos next to you?
It's gone.
Gone. The whole sleeve's going to be gone. And you're going to say, wait a minute, where did all of that go? Now, when you get home from the grocery store, you quickly take out a bunch of baggies, break everything down into baggies, put the baggies in the cabinet. When you go to grab a snack, you grab a baggie and sit down. When that baggie's gone, you have to get all the way up, go back into the kitchen, and get another bag. A lot of people will go get another bag, but you're at a lower chance of getting another bag versus having it sitting right next to you. It's just one other step you have to make yourself go through. Okay. So, always shop with a grocery list. What happens when we go to the grocery store with no list and we're starving? What do you come home with?
Junk. Everything.
Everything. The whole junk in the whole grocery store. So when you're hungry and you don't have a list, you will take everything off those shelves. You get home, 3 days later, you're going to look in your cabinets and say, why did I buy that? Do I really want that? It's going to sit there and it's going to waste money. Or it's going to be junk and you'll eat it and it won't be a great choice. Always have a grocery list and plan ahead. Even if you just sit in your car the 2 minutes before you run in, jot down the things you know you want and then shoot in and shoot out. Now, stick to the perimeter. Why do I say that? Now the perimeter, think about all of those things in those coolers. What do we find in the perimeter of the grocery store?
The non-processed.
Vegetables,
Yes, all the
fruits and
produce,
vegetables on the edge. And
fruits and vegetables, we have some dairy,
ice cream.
eggs, sometimes the ice cream. We want to scoot right through the ice cream. Now, also keeping healthy snacks conveniently located. So if we're in the car and we're driving and you're starving coming home from work, and you drive by McDonald's, you drive by Dunkin' Donuts, you drive by another McDonald's, it's wearing away at your at your thoughts. It's saying, okay, come get something from the drive-thru. If you have a snack in the car sitting next to you already there, you have something to eat, at least just to hold you over on the drive home. Always have snacks conveniently located. That way you have something to grab.
that's a good idea. You can put your healthy snack next to the Cheetos.
Right next to the Cheetos. So also, cooking for healthy lunches during the week. Okay, so cook extra. I always tell people when you're making dinner, or if you're a person who likes to make dinner, make a little bit more than you actually need. Cook a little bit extra. After dinner's over, package it up into a little container, you have lunch for the week. Whether it's you do it every night, or you make a little extra on Monday and then a little extra on Wednesday, that way you have something to bring the next day. You can just put it right away as you're packing up and cleaning up dinner. Now, bringing the whole family on board. Probably the hardest part when you're making a lifestyle change, but it makes things so much easier. If you're doing something alone, a lot of times if you're the person cooking in the house, you have to make a meal for yourself, a meal for your spouse, and then a meal for the kids. That's a lot. If everyone's on the same board or everyone's on the same team, you can kind of make one meal for everybody and everyone has the same goal. So kind of talking about this stuff with your family or with whoever you're living with can make making these changes that much easier. Okay, any questions?
While you were talking, I was thinking about, again, this is televised, so we have a lot of people that do watch. And I think people are always question or confused when they see hydrogenated vegetable oils, partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, and so forth. And then some packaging might say no trans fats, no hydrogenated vegetable oils. I know that partially and hydrogenated type vegetable oils are almost impossible to digest and store, either in the cells or in the liver or wherever, and they just sit there and sit there.
They're not good.
Comment on, I don't know if you could comment
Yes.
on those type of vegetable oils.
Absolutely. So when you see hydrogenated anything, all that's happening, same thing with butter. So when we have margarine butter, that's something that's hydrogenated. What's happening is they wanted to create something that was more shelf stable, that would last in our cabinets longer and be cheaper for them to make. So they literally took a bunch of hydrogens and pushed them into the food item. So it's man-made, it's not natural. So when something's hydrogenated, we're putting in hydrogens. And what happens when we do that is, like we talked about before, it becomes more energy dense. And it also becomes unfamiliar to our bodies. So our body does not know how to properly take care of it. It will deal with it, it will make it work, but when we're generally speaking health-wise, it's not supposed to be there. So a lot of times it gets stored as fat, it gets excreted, it just kind of messes with your system a bit. So when you're checking your labels and looking at label reading, you definitely want to stay away from anything that says hydrogenated on it. Any other questions?
What oils would you recommend? I don't want to get too complicated, but
Sure.
they have the safflower, you have the olive, you have sunseed type oils, you have, there's another one, I can't think of the name of it. Canola. What's the good, what's not good? I mean, this might be something people are thinking of.
Absolutely. So I'll just go with saying which ones you want to be grabbing off the shelves. So olive oil is an awesome option. It's a monounsaturated oil. It's great for the body. But something to keep in mind, most people cook with olive oil, which is fine. But olive oil has a low smoke point, which means that when we're cooking it, it hits its top temperature or its peak temperature pretty fast. All that means is it's going rancid. It's not harmful to our body necessarily, but we lose the vitamins and minerals. We lose the benefit of having that oil. On the other hand, we have avocado oil, which has a higher smoke point. That we can cook with when we're putting something in the oven, when we're grilling in the summer. Avocado oil is what you want to use. They're both great, healthy oils. Just think olive oil, lower temperatures, or cold salad dressings, avocado oil for the hot stuff. Those are two great oils to pick. Coconut oil is a bit debated at the moment because it is very high in saturated fat. On occasion, if it's something you do want to consume, I think that's fine. But I usually don't recommend for something to be every single meal, every single day, because there is a lot of saturated fat. Now, when it comes to canola oils and safflower oil and vegetable oil and all those, they're just a little bit of a step below. They're not, some of them aren't terrible for you, some of them are okay, but they're not ones you want to be cooking with all the time. If you could stick to the better oils, the mono and polyunsaturated, even though some of those are also mono and polyunsaturated, if you could stick to the olive oil and the avocado oil and the coconut for the majority of the time, then you're good to go.
Can you comment about the short triglycerides and
Short chain,
Coconut, short
medium
chain.
chain, yes.
medium chain and coconut oils?
So a lot of people take MCT oil or MCT pills or supplements now, and those are very healthy for you. So it's just a type of a triglyceride, a type of a chain that's good for our bodies in the way it's processed and the way we take energy from it. So some people use it for energy. Now, coconut oil has MCT oil in it, or MCTs in it. That's why it's considered a healthy item. So that's why coconut oil is considered to be this superfood or this super item that we're supposed to have all the time. Just keeping in mind that there's also saturated fat in it and the MCTs, that's something you kind of have to balance. So yes, there is a great benefit, but there's also something in the back that's not so awesome.
Now, we know that some people are listening, and from a personal perspective, and I don't think my situation is unique for a man my age who lives alone. I work out very hard at the gym 5 or 6 days a week.
Good for you.
And I'm about 10 pounds above my recommended BMI. I cannot lose that weight. And the reason being is I just like junk food. And so I don't have much junk food at home. However, like if I buy I say candy for my daughter, it's usually gone before I give it to her. So that's a real problem. So I don't keep junk food at home usually, but when I do, like I bought a box of Cheez-Its yesterday, it was gone by the end of the night. But I didn't feel that bad because it wasn't a giant box, but it's a big box of Cheez-Its next to night. So I don't know. I just can't lose that 10 pounds. Any input, any insight you have would be appreciated. I mean,
Don't go to the store, Joe.
well, go in the store like early in the morning to get a donut, because then you get a donut market basket and a cup of coffee. At the end of buying junk food, it doesn't get any better. But it's not good for you, though.
That's the problem. So a lot of times, even if you're working out 5, 6, 7 days per week, if you are having those weekly, daily little indulgences like the full box of Cheez-Its and donuts and such, it's going to be hard to lose those last few pounds. Now, you may not be super overweight, but you may not be able to get down to where you want to be. Now, indulgences are necessary. Everyone has that time when they're craving something, they need something, but the best way to handle it and plan ahead is just to plan. So if you know that you're someone who can't eat any Cheez-Its without having an entire box, don't buy the Cheez-Its and bring them home. That way, if you are having them, it's a lot less often, and it's just when you go to someone else's house or if you're in a situation when they're in front of you. It's all about stocking your cabinets.
See, Larry's one of my best friends, and he thinks I go to his house because I like him. Actually, his wife has great snacks.
Good
He
snack
doesn't
house.
live, he's almost around the corner from where I live, so it's so easy. I don't have it in my house. I've already been eaten, but not at Larry's house. He and his wife can take very good care of him.
Everyone has that fun with the good snacks. Yeah.
I would ask if you'd make a little comment about making sort of choices. In the press, when you talk about nutrition, it seems like there are two big topics that come up. One is these various diets and what are the good diets and so on. And one is choosing more smaller things. And I think of two examples. One is picking sugar versus any one of the number of different sugar alternatives. And two is, when I was little, butter was the only thing you could ever buy. And then sort of in the 90s and early 2000s, everything seemed to shift to margarine. And now I think margarine has sort of gone off kilter, and everybody's sort of going back to butter in terms of being a better way to go. Do these really have an impact, or is this something that sucks a lot of oxygen out of a room in a conversation and really isn't a major difference one way or another? I don't know what your thoughts are on, they're two different things, obviously, but...
No, absolutely. So they are hot topics. They're trendy. So they're things that people enjoy talking about because they're not new, but the general public is becoming more aware of those two topics specifically. There are some others like coconut oil and other specific diets. So when it comes to butter, margarine is hydrogenated, so that's something that is not good for us. Making the switch from margarine to regular butter is a good choice. It does affect your health in a positive way. But at the same time, if you were to switch from butter to olive oil, that would be an even better choice. So butter isn't necessarily a healthy component to a diet. If you have it every once in a while, far and few between, not going to kill you, not the worst thing in the world. But it is a better choice or a healthier choice to go from the margarine to regular butter. Now, sugar, on the other hand, very, very hot topic. The problem with a lot of sugar substitutes we're finding out today is what happens long term. So a lot of these came about or became frequent flyers in our diet more recently or in the past few recent years. Now, we didn't really know at the time what's going to happen long term. Studies have been done, clinical studies have been done, and the long-term effects of these sugar substitutes are not great. They're not things that we want to be dealing with. Sugar, on the other hand, not necessarily healthy. Sugar is still sugar. It will spike your blood sugar, and it will do some not so great things to your body, but it's pure and it's natural, so our body recognizes it. Now, the one sugar substitute, again, still debated. There are varying opinions on both, but stevia is one that, when it comes to your glycemic index, if that's something you guys know about, your glycemic index is essentially this scale. Some things will either spike your blood sugar very high or have little to no effect on your blood sugar at all. If they're high on the glycemic index, they'll spike your sugar. Low, not so much. So stevia is one of the sugar substitutes that does not spike your blood sugar, or at least not very high. It has a very minimal effect on your glycemic index. So in that case, sometimes that's a good substitute for people who are addicted or need to have sugar or sugar substitute in their drinks every day and a lot of their different things that they're mixing and making and baking, then that's a good substitute. If it's just something you're having every once in a while, you bake once a month, you maybe put it in something here and there, not very often, then sugar's fine too. But the best way to go is to not use sugars as an additive into your food items. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Can I do a follow-up question to that?
Absolutely.
Can you comment on the benefits or downsides of maple syrup and agave syrup?
Okay, so that's another very trendy thing. Maple syrup and agave are pure sugar. So sugar is sugar. If you're having it, it will spike your blood sugar. Now, the benefits to it are very self-reported versus clinically reported. So there haven't been any clinical serious studies figuring out, okay, is this really doing any benefit? Whereas a lot of people will say, I feel better doing this, or my stomach feels better, or I feel stronger, my aches are gone, so on and so forth. It's mostly just self-reported. So from a clinical, scientific standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. From my standpoint, it's pure sugar. Your blood sugar would spike and then drop, so it wouldn't be something I would recommend to have on a daily basis. It's comparable to cane sugar, in my mind at least. Sure.
Moderation, huh, Frank?
So they say.
Another thing that I see advertised, again, I imagine people are thinking about this too, I see advertised a lot are probiotics. Now, I take probiotics every day to maintain a good balance of intestinal health and not have any overgrowth of the negative bacteria that can produce toxins and so forth. So I always take probiotics, and when I don't feel well, I'll double and triple it. It doesn't really matter. But maybe you could comment in general on probiotics and why people might even take them.
Absolutely. Probiotics are great for a bunch of different reasons. Sometimes I recommend them if a person has a food sensitivity or an intolerance. A lot of times when this happens or we can't properly digest food, we start to get bloated. Some people will get huge bloated stomachs after they eat, and then all of a sudden they're taking probiotics and they have no problem at all. The bacteria for probiotics, some people are lacking some bacteria and some people just need more for certain foods. This is a bit of a different, somewhat out of my scope of practice, but for within my scope of practice, it helps people with digestion of certain food items. If people have problems with digestion, whether it's indigestion in any way, shape, or form, creating that sort of distended abdomen, a lot of times probiotic will help. Another point or another reason I would prescribe someone probiotics if they have a problem with GI passing, probiotics can a lot of times help with that. And sometimes we test people for food sensitivities, and when they have a sensitivity, a lot of times we'll recommend a probiotic to help with gut integrity. It just helps keep the gut in check and give out all the bacteria that someone needs. But it's important, or at least we've always recommended, to rotate probiotics. So if you're someone who is taking probiotics religiously, a lot of times I'll say to finish out that bottle and then try a different bottle, because the bottle that you're having only has a certain number. I mean, granted, there are billions of strains or billions of however many in there, it'll tell you right on the bottle, but if we're taking that one bottle for years and years and years, you have enough of those. So might as well switch it to a different bottle that has different strains, a few, same numbers, probably billions, but just a couple different ones to kind of switch it up and keep your gut nice and healthy.
That's a good point. You don't want to just take lactobacillus all the time.
Right.
People that have a propensity towards C. diff would use something called Saccharomyces borrelia, I believe, is the one that works strongest against people that have a problem with Clostridium difficile. But so there are a huge variety of. We have a half a dozen different bottles at home, and we rotate
Perfect.
almost daily.
Oh, wow.
So
It can't hurt.
no.
At least to my knowledge, I don't think it can.
While you're on the topic of additives and sort of beneficial, last year there was a big study that came out about a general broad spectrum vitamin and whether that's truly beneficial in American diet or not. You sort of didn't touch on that. How do you recommend that to?
Supplements?
Yeah.
So for supplements, a lot of it is individual. If I'm recommending supplements for a person, I'll have them bring their labs in. So a lot of people, as a general rule of thumb, first of all, anyone in New England should absolutely be taking vitamin D, unless they check with their doctor and the doctor tells them otherwise for a specific reason. But vitamin D in New England is absolutely necessary. I've yet to see someone in my office who wasn't deficient when I looked at their labs. So that's always something to look for. On the other hand, for other vitamins, multivitamins, there are a few studies out there showing that we don't absorb as much as we think we are, but we are getting something out of it. So it's a little hard to say whether or not it's really worth it if it's something you're spending money on all the time versus just getting a few of the good ones, or if you know you need vitamin D, getting vitamin D. If you know that you're having issues or symptoms of lacking certain B vitamins and then taking that specific B vitamins to replenish. Fish oil, of course, is always a really good one too for our brain and heart health, but it really just depends on the person. Vitamins and supplements are very individual, so I usually like to see someone's labs and then kind of backtrack from there.
Just one thing to add on the fat-soluble ADEK, don't never overtake on fat-soluble vitamins because they do store. They're fat-soluble, so they're absorbed into the fat. Water-soluble go in,
Yes.
metabolize, probably go out the same day. But
Yes.
fat-soluble is completely different.
Yes.
What are fat soluble specific vitamins we are talking about?
ADEK, vitamin A, vitamin D.
No, okay.
We're lacking, a lot of people in the Northeast, and you're right on, are lacking vitamin D because we don't go outside that much in the wintertime, and vitamin D is only, sunlight stimulates the production of vitamin D in the body, and that's it. We don't naturally make vitamin D as we will other vitamins within the body. So we either get it from sunlight or we get it from an outside or exogenous source of vitamin D to supplement. And I would say
Right.
most people, from everything I've read, are lacking, have even I know I have a low amount of vitamin D. There's prescription vitamin Ds, but then there's over-the-counter vitamin Ds, 2,000, 4,000 units, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But taking a little more is not the worst thing in the world, considering we're not in the sun that much because of the 0-degree temperature. At least I'm not.
I just have a question about daily calorie intake.
Yes.
And what the average amount of daily calories should be per person. Obviously, it depends on size and everything. And then how you space that out over the course of a day. I know several people miss meals, skip breakfast, things like that. And what does that do to their metabolism throughout the day?
Absolutely. So daily calorie intake, on average, what I see is the average American probably needs 1,500. But caveat to that, there's a machine that measures it, and for us, that's what we use. So there are formulas that if you go online, you can type in Mifflin St. Gior, and it's a little formula you can plug in your height, your weight, your age, your gender, and it'll tell you how many calories per day you should be having based off of your activity. But realistically, not very accurate. We have a little machine actually that measures it. You can get it from a few different places in hospitals. It's called indirect calorimetry. You just breathe into it, measures the exchange of gases, and it tells you how many calories your body burns at rest, your resting metabolic rate. So once someone has that number, that's what we base off how many calories they need in an entire day. So that number, we then factor in how much activity they have, and then on top of that, if they're trying to lose weight or gain weight or even just maintain, then that number alters slightly. But the average person, I would say the average number that I see is around 1,500. So a lot of times we see on nutrition labels 2,000. I have probably in my counseling, I've only seen maybe 1 or 2 people who actually needed 2,000 calories. So it's not a very common number for the average American. Yes, there are people out there who need that much, but it's not average. Now, when it comes to breaking down calories throughout the entire day, for someone who's trying to maintain or lose weight, a lot of times a good rule of thumb is to think of your day as an upside-down triangle. So in the morning at breakfast time, you want to have a big, hearty breakfast because you're starting your day and you're going to be moving and awake for the rest of the day. So you want to have lots of carbs, lots of protein, and lots of fat. Come lunchtime, a little bit smaller, just a little bit smaller, not too much smaller, but a little bit smaller so that you're having a little less at lunchtime. Then dinner time should be your smallest meal. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. If you're someone who works out at night, then you need to replenish the carbs and the protein that you're using in order to rebuild your stores. If you are someone who is up very late at night and moving around for your job, if you have a night shift type of a job, then in that case, that pattern would change. But for the average person, if you're coming home at night, eating dinner, sitting down on the couch to watch TV, and then going to bed, we don't need that much food at night. Specifically, simple carbs. So protein and fats we still do. We need everything, but a lot of times when it comes to pastas and breads, that's our fast, quick source of energy. We don't need too much of that late at night because we're going straight to bed. So calorie breakdown wise, that's a general recommendation, but of course it does differ person to person.
Two things. First, Joe is 20 pounds overweight. Let's get it straight, Joe. Let's get it straight. And
That's 20 less than you.
that's right. Does anybody in the audience have any questions they'd like to ask? Come up and ask us. Perfectly fine. Okay. I would ask. Is there any more you'd like to present?
No, that is everything I have for you.
I want to thank you very, very much. It was informative. It got us thinking and asking questions. Hopefully it got everyone at home thinking and asking questions too. I find you very knowledgeable, and I think you're an asset to your profession. So I want to thank you very much for coming in tonight and giving your time to the Board of Health in North Andover.
Thank you very much.
Much
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I mean, you're obviously a private source. This is sort of a little off, a little weird. Is there an online source that you think is a reasonable place if somebody wanted to sort of look at some of these things, that a particular website, like something at the federal level or something that you think is a reasonable source for somebody who wanted to sort of do some general reading?
Research. So I would recommend places like PubMed and JAND, like academy journals and published literature, peer-reviewed literature, just because it's the only thing that's definitive answers to questions versus opinions. So if someone were looking to answer a question themselves, I would look research-based versus looking on someone's blog or website, because most of that is just opinion. It's interpreted research. So always try to go for the research or the source of where the information is coming from. That way you know that there isn't as much of a bias in there and it's actual true fact. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was wonderful. Why don't we go to approval of the minutes? Has everybody had a chance to see the minutes that was sent around?
Yes.
Okay. Joe, have you seen
Yes.
the minutes? Motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Joe's going to sign that.
If you want, you can break down your stuff and you can just hit the display off button on the panel behind the laptop. Yep.
Erica, do you have, just,
Thank you.
oh,
Today is the 18th, yes.
that'll be done in a second. If people wanted to reach you and obtain some of this knowledge, or do you have a business? Do you have a website or the company that you work for, so that in case they wanted to take advantage of what you have to offer?
Sure. We're called Nutrition in Motion. Our office is right here in North Andover on 451 Andover Street. Our website is nimnh.com. So through there, you can find our phone number. All of our practitioners are on there with information. If you're looking to contact me personally, my email address is ecarneglia@nimnh.com. But all of our information is on our website. You could even just Google Nutrition in Motion, and
Okay.
everything should be there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we just go to the department reports, and then we'll, actually, no, we have, Jeff is here. Jeff Thompson's here from, he wanted to say a few things. Is this on here? Jeff's here
I don't have
from
Jeff on
Thompson
the agenda.
Brothers, yeah.
You can go up and speak up.
Yeah, that's fine. Jeff, did you want to come up? Just talk, Jeff wanted to talk for a minute on the, so we're just going to stay on communications, announcements, discussions for a minute, and talk about the recycling just for a second with Thompson
Yeah,
Brothers
just an
Industries.
informational thing. Obviously, most everybody here is a resident of the town. I know recently there have been issues besides the weather that have been concerning the recycling that we pick up for the town as part of our site assignment, which is the reason why I'm here for the Board of Health. A lot of recycling is being delayed, and it's not an issue with us. It's an issue with the facility that is handling that recycling for the town, which is the Greenworks facility down in Peabody. They're not taking the material, and it's a global issue with, especially with China. A lot of materials are being held up. The plants are filling up with material, and they're not processing. So really, that's the only reason why I'm here, is because I know the board has some fingers in it. I'll be at the selectmen's meeting next week, and just to make sure that people are aware that, don't shoot the messenger. All we do is pick it up and take it where we're told to take it. And if they're not taking our trucks in to dump, then, we can't get back out on the street to pick up people's single-stream recycling that's out at the end of the driveway.
So there's been delays in North Andover as far
Oh,
as...
sure,
so
we had a delay. I mean, it's not just the weather, it's not just the holidays. We had 2 trucks at the Greenworks facility last week, 7 hours for one truck waiting to dump, and 5 hours for the other truck waiting to dump, which caused us then not to be able to go back out. They were there before 6 o'clock in the morning. They didn't dump out until 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So all that recycling that should have been picked up that morning, because we're usually out on the streets at 7 picking up, they weren't getting picked up.
So is it like the market for these recyclables is kind of falling out?
China's not taking as much of the cardboard and the plastics right now. They're just not taking that commodity in. I know there are other recycle facilities. Waste Management has one in Billerica that if you don't have a contract with them, if you were a spot market trying to go to the different facilities, if you're a spot market, they won't take you. Not taking it.
So that
They're
just-
only taking in the material that they're contracted to take
So does
in.
it just go into the municipal solid waste stream at that point?
It very well could be, or they're trying to find someplace else. I know Casella has a big single-stream recycling facility down in Charlestown, but I don't think they're looking at taking excess material. They're only taking the stuff that they're contracted to.
Right.
And Greenworks, North Andover is one of the few communities that is dumping at their facility. North Andover's got a really good deal. They're getting paid for their single-stream recycling, where just about every other town pays to get rid of recycling. So I know North Andover wants us to keep going there.
Wow.
It's unusual right now. It's very unusual. They're getting paid.
So do you have to stockpile it at your location on Holt Road, or?
No, we've been trying to work with DPW to get in contact with Greenworks, and you got to let us dump. you got to let us dump.
Right.
You know, we don't want to be calling up the town and saying, you know, where do you want us to take it? And we've got to take it someplace.
Right.
But, you know, that would be the absolute last resort. Nobody wants to see it dumped out into the trash. I mean, people took the time to take that stuff, and it's a valuable commodity when there's a market for it.
Right.
What, so, I thought sort of the whole recycling idea, at least as a concept, was going up. What's driving the reduction in the commodity? Because there's so much volume that it's kind of a supply and demand thing that's driven down?
It is supply and demand, but it was also, there was a lot of contamination that was being put in the recycle stream being sent to China. So you could have recycling facilities putting a lot of trash mixed in with their recycling, and the Chinese eventually get to the point where they put up a wall and they were turning ships away. You'd have whole ships going over there, and if they found a certain amount of contamination, take your ship, we're not taking it, go bring it back to wherever you picked it up from. So the people that are actually packaging it up to send it to China or India or Vietnam, they're being very, very, very careful because they don't want to get the shipping charges and
Get
that
a
load of
full
material
ship back,
coming
yeah.
back, because now they don't know what to do with it. So they're being very picky about the cleanliness of the material that is going over to China.
Has there been any point where you have not been able to do curbside pickups because of this?
Well, we've had a couple challenging days. The town did step up and helped out on one of those days where, you know, we were there before 6 o'clock in the morning. The JRM, which owns Greenworks, their trucks were behind us. They just drive right around us, leave us in line. Their trucks went out, worked that day, came back, drove right around us the second time, dumped out, and just left us sitting there. I mean, we have no choice. When they tell us we can dump, we dump.
Right.
But we've had some challenging days with them.
Okay.
But
So you think we're going to get away from single stream, single stream and have to do separation again, or?
there are a lot of facilities that are doing the dual stream where, you know, you have your metals and your cardboards already separated out from the, you know, the really waste recycling that you would consider kind of trashy, that would have that stuff on it, that they're still operating. I didn't hear it. Somebody else I know in the industry had said that the E.L. Harvey, they operate a single stream out in Weston, Mass, that Ben Harvey, one of the owners, was on a radio. I don't know if it was a radio or maybe even a Board of Health meeting like this, and he was indicating that if the market doesn't improve, they're just going to shut down the single stream recycling plant.
I mean, it seems like particularly the paper gets contaminated.
Yes. Yep, lots of food waste gets mixed in, you know, it's just not as clean.
You can't do anything with it.
That's not an area of the recycling that we get in, but
Right.
yeah, I know it's a problem with them.
I mean, I think single stream is very convenient for people. It increases the recycling rates, but at the same time, you know, some of the material, if you don't separate the brown glass from the clear glass and yada, 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 you can't use it. It becomes like road base.
Yeah, glass has always been a challenge in that area of recycling. You know, as anybody that's been on the Hope Road and seen the facility up behind us, you know that glass is an issue.
Yeah.
But it is, it's more or less, like I said, I'm really just here to, anybody that has got an issue with the single stream recycling, please don't blame us. It's not us. We're picking it up and we're going where we're being told to take it to. If they can't take it, it's causing problems, but it's not us. And because single stream is part of the site assignment, that's the reason why I didn't just go to the selectmen only. I came here first. You guys had a meeting ahead of time, just so you know what's going on.
Thank you.
All right?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't we do the department reports?
Wait those for now, we'll do those at the end, just go through the.
What's that?
Want to just do those at the end?
You want to skip
Those
down?
are your information only, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. You had the septic installer discussion and fee schedule.
Yep, there's some basic housekeeping type
Okay,
stuff.
why don't we do that?
In your packets, there's a resident complaint about a septic installer we have in town. We don't have to talk about names or addresses, just wanted to bring this to your attention. It was a installer that we worked with this past fall, a homeowner who had a project that was ongoing that had a really hard time with this installer. I've had some issues with him in the past as well, so I've been talking to legal about what to do moving forward. As is right now, our septic season is closed, so he does not have a permit to operate, and there's no installation going on right now anyway. So we're in that lull period, which is good. So I've met with legal twice on this already. He does not have a valid permit right now, and he hasn't applied for his renewal yet. So when he applies for his renewal, there may be some things that we want to do, either to bring him in, to discuss the issues in the past, or issue a denial and not give him a permit to work this coming season, or setting conditions for him if we do allow him to work. But just wanted to let you guys have the resident complaint, read through it, take a look at it. Nothing's being done right now. Our season doesn't open until April, so we've got some time to wait and think about this. But I wanted to get it to you so you guys can read it. And I'll hear back from legal again. I've already met with her twice, like I said. She said basically there's nothing we can do right now because the season's not open. But she does say at least moving forward we should try to cover our bases, make sure we do things by the book, and make sure that everything is above board with either a denial or any conditions that we do instill on his permit next year.
Well, what we've done in the past, I mean, we haven't seen anyone for a while, but we've brought them before us
Correct.
to
Discuss it.
hear the complaint, discuss it, and
Yeah.
this has been an ongoing issue. This isn't a new issue.
Correct.
Okay, so.
If the resident does not want to come forward, they submit this to us in the town.
Yeah.
Just because we discussed it with them and we wanted their side of the story on paper, so we could take this next step if needed.
All right. Well, I
Well,
guess
can
it's
council
information.
recommend, you say conditions, I mean, what would that look like, or what would that mean? I guess that would be my question back. Conditions are always tricky because you don't sort of learn about these things till stuff happens, and then trying to catch up, it's like, what do you cut somebody off at that point? That's not a great, sometimes not even a worse help than,
Right. Conditions would be more cumbersome for us in the department. It would probably mean increased inspections, things of that nature. Timelines and deadlines for certain tasks in the job. Because one of the complaints in this was the time it took for it to get completed, which was a burden on the homeowner, and it was unnecessary. So one of my conditions would be if you start a job, it's got to be done within so many days or weeks, depending on how the size of the job. And these are the inspections that would be required above and beyond the average or usual inspections, just to make sure that things are done right and there's no cutting corners and the homeowners are kept happy.
But to Tom's point, is if we issue a license and condition it, and they don't meet the letter of the condition, then our only remedy is to pull the license, which harms the homeowner.
which is partway through an installation, number one, and number two, does that homeowner get informed of this ahead of time, and how does that happen when they're looking around for installers?
That's what legal is looking into, but that could be a condition to move forward. It could be a way to move forward without revoking his license. She was looking for the due process and different avenues.
I
The last
think
time they met with
we're
her.
working way too hard. Just bring the person before us, find out why this installer is not doing an adequate job and not following the rules and regulations, and
It
that's
looks
it.
like there's like a half a dozen
Yeah, that's it.
violations in the letter right here.
It's called Read the Riot Act. This is very simple. We've had many
I
people,
think there's enough there, but,
Yeah.
you know,
we've had many before us in
I
the
mean, if
past.
this is accurate.
Yeah,
It's fairly accurate, yes.
All right, so if it's accurate, then,
Yep.
we'll have to decide. What we do is,
And reiterating what legal told me.
all right.
understood.
Well,
But
it's informational right now until
Yeah.
we get an application.
Exactly.
I agree with
Yes.
Tom and Frank that why wait till they're in the middle of something if there's a problem that occurs? I say we nip it in the bud. That's it.
Easy enough.
You guys agree?
I'll agree when we have something before us.
So next is fees. This is just for housekeeping. This is fees you guys had set back in 2016. Nothing has been raised yet. I've been working with Megan in Sweet Safe on revising our food protection program and the applications, plan reviews, things like that. We are condensing all of these food permits from 23 down to 9, I believe. is the final number. We will be changing these permit values eventually, once we condense everything down. So when we condense them from 23 down to 9, the total sum for food fees collected every year will remain the same. So those aren't changing yet, but they will change. But for housekeeping, your fees, you should vote on this, adopt it as your fee schedule, at least until anything new comes before you. The nonprofit thing that's in there, the reason why I put that is we had a lot of questions this year regarding no fee for nonprofits and who was entitled to a no fee for a temporary permit. So your bake sales, your church sales, your things like that, we don't charge a fee for. They're just, it would typically be $35 for a temporary event, but for nonprofits, we don't charge. It's always been that way. It's been that way for as far as I can remember. But there were a lot of questions on that, and I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware that's what that means. So, for instance, St. Mike's doesn't get charged a food permit. The Georgian church down the street doesn't get charged a temporary, when they do.
Mike's?
Yeah, so if they do a temporary event,
Oh, St. Michael's.
yes. If your North Andover Boosters Club does a bake sale, they don't get charged a permit. Things like that. So
But you still permit them.
we still permit them, yes. We just don't charge them a fee for it. So that's what that nonprofit means and says no fee. That's been there for a long time. Just wanted to make sure that was clarified on this fee schedule.
But if you bring those 9 permits, categories before us within the year, we could change this. This isn't set.
This will all get
for a year.
changed at once.
No, but we could change to 9
Yep.
in July or something.
Yes. Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that as a January thing, it has been done in a couple of years, do it again in January every year, set your fee schedules for the year, and you're done.
So I move to approve the fee schedule as presented.
I have a question. Oh, somebody has to,
I'll second that.
okay.
Discussion?
Yeah, discussion. How do our fees compare to other towns?
They're comparable.
They are.
Yes.
Because I remember when we did this, it took a long time then.
I was actually part of that when I was next door.
Okay. All right. So they're comparable. All right.
Yes. At least the local communities in this area are all similar to this as to what they charge for fees. They've all gone up since this. And I think when you guys set this schedule, everything went up a little bit, as it did across the region.
Okay.
I know you're looking at this, Brian. This is interesting to me. The Body Arts establishment, I know that comes to the town, but we oversee the facility as well as each individual practitioner?
Yep.
That's interesting. Everything else in the state is at a state level.
For cosmetology, typically, yes. Now, and massage is as well. Body art still stays with the local communities.
Remember, we talked about this at a meeting, we had somebody doing medical tattoos to hide scars.
Right.
Any more discussion?
Do we have a professional that does this, that's in a medical facility now, that might work with surgeons and so forth to do the cosmetic type makeup? Or
We don't have one permitted this year.
okay.
We only have, I believe, 3.
We have
Two.
two facilities, and we have 4 girls.
4 girls, okay.
Okay. Okay, we have a second to the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous.
And I originally anticipated having the food fees already done for this meeting, but it didn't work out. We're a little bit behind. But we do have all of the new plan review guides, all the new applications, and the new categories are already set. So once we finish all that, we can get the fees changed sometime this spring.
So you're consolidating a bunch of these together?
Yes. They just get, there's too many, too confusing. There was one plan review for every single category that didn't really fit any of them. So we broke them all into different categories.
Okay.
Appointing the agents, that's just housekeeping. Under Master Laws, Chapter 111, Section 30, you guys have the ability to appoint agents. I don't know if you guys have done that in the past couple of years. I don't know if, I think we did that when Caroline first started this past spring. But I think maybe for housekeeping every January, you do the whole department as agents of the board, just for crossing your Ts and dotting your Is.
We did it a couple years ago, maybe not a year or two, but I
Right, every now and then.
remember doing it with Susan.
We did it when you started.
Yes,
We wanted to make sure we appointed you as the agent.
correct, and we did it with Caroline when she started.
Carolyn, yeah.
She wanted to figure every January, add this on there.
So this
So
would,
who are we appointing? You, Caroline,
Michelle,
Michelle? Anybody else?
that's it.
Tony?
Tony?
No, no, no. I believe you have to appoint the burial agent.
Yes, we had to do that for Joyce,
Oh,
right?
town clerk. For-
Town clerk.
Yeah.
So I'll
Thank you.
No,
move,
not me.
so I'll move,
Do we appoint the town physician? Because you act on behalf of the board, like, on...
do I have
He's
to be up for the
Or
board?
is
I
that
think
a
I'm
different-
appointed by
sort of
the,
different set
appointed
of-
by the selectmen.
Correct.
Okay.
So I move that we appoint our health director, public health nurse, and health agent, and Joyce Bradshaw, town clerk, as the burial agent, and the respective other three as agents of the board. That's the motion.
second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay.
All right, next is tobacco sales. We did our last round of compliance checks, and we had 3 sales. Sam's Mobile was not one of them, passed their inspection. But we did have 3 sales. I put the letters in your packets, just so you have a heads up.
Informational.
Informational, 2 of them have already paid. The 3rd one will be paying. It's within the 21 days still. But I don't believe he will be appealing that citation.
It's been a long time since we've had violations.
I think there was Sam's last year, and that was it.
Sam, yeah.
And then, yeah, we had 3 this round. I was actually kind of surprised.
Yeah. We haven't seen Ron in years.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well,
I see him all the time.
oh, you do,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Goals and objectives, Brian?
And this is just, I put a little write-up in your packets. This is what I submitted as part of our budget plan for FY19. I met with Michelle and Caroline and Tony about some goals moving forward this coming year. And this is just what we came up with as a few bullet point items and some things to concentrate on. We still have some things that we're working on in fiscal year 18, which doesn't end until June, which is some of the things we talked about last year, such as the rental housing program, things like that.
Can I ask you about the Sharps program?
Yep.
Where do we have a kiosk now, or do we,
We don't have a kiosk.
you're just collecting them at the health department?
Correct. And Caroline's been working on that and getting information out there. She did some flyers.
Well, I'm going to work with Chris in the IT department. She helped the fire department kind of update their website, and it links to our website as well, but our Sharps policy on our website is a little outdated, so I have drafted a new flyer, and she's going to help me kind of redo our
Somebody
link
listening
there.
tonight has got a bottle full of Sharps. What do they do with them?
What's that?
Someone who's listening on the TV tonight, they have a bottle full of Sharps. What do they do with them?
So they can bring them down to my office, and usually what I do is I have all the Sharps that people bring in their Sharp-approved containers. Either we're still accepting like laundry detergent bottles as long as they're capped and duct taped off. And then, of course, if they have a Sharps container, and then what I'll do is I'll put them in a box and have the, it's Stericycle now, they come and pick it up. Or the fire department will accept Sharps as well. They have a kiosk, the fire department.
The fire department?
Yeah, so it's, there are requirements as to how big it can be in order, because it's like a pull down.
Yep.
So depending on how big, I know they've had people go there, it didn't fit in the kiosk, so they brought their containers to me.
I see.
I would think that the police department, Caroline, it would be nice if they had the Sharps with the medicine drop-off.
So they won't take, so that's a complicated, so they won't take Sharps, but they'll take medications. We won't take medications, but we'll take Sharps. So I had, a resident bring in some old medications, vials that were still a powder, and Sharps, and they were all kind of came in like a prepackaged container, so I could get rid of the Sharps. And then since the medication was still in powder form, I was able to drop them off at the police department. But if they were liquid, they wouldn't take them. So there's a lot of, education that still needs to get out there and just kind of
Some
clarify. what-
location issues are related to some regulations or at the state level or a statute, isn't that?
I
You
believe
can't just
so.
kind of decide to put one somewhere, I think. It's
Right, yeah. So, what I've done is anyone who drops off, like with that whole situation, I took care of the sharps and then, went and took care of the medications for them. But technically, the meds have to go to the police department, the sharps has to go to the fire department, to us.
Well, and people that may be watching perhaps don't know that much, if any at all, about our new community outreach worker. Can you talk a little bit about that
They haven't been hired yet. That's going to be in this next year's budget.
in this next year's
Correct, so it'll be fiscal year 19.
budget?
So it'll be this coming July.
Okay, so that person would be coming aboard this coming July?
I believe they would probably advertise and get somebody lined up before once the budget gets passed through town meeting, and they know they're going to have the funding available as of July 1st, then I would assume they would have everything ready to go around that date.
I also recall that, going back to the better part of a year or so ago, that there was a meeting, a series of meetings, town meetings on opiates, overdoses and so forth. Whatever happened to that? You know?
Don't know, I think we need
That sort of
additional-
dissolved.
Yeah.
That was when a selectman put that together, and Ed was our representative at the time. And it was one of those things where there was a lot of everybody doing the same thing at many different times, and I think they were a little behind the curve, and it just didn't gain a lot of traction.
Yeah, Larry and I went to one of the meetings, I recall.
Yeah.
It was a police station.
Yeah.
And, well, if it's been dissolved, then so be it. But speaking of opiates and the epidemic, I was reading, and I wasn't planning to talk about it all, but I was reading early today in the AARP bulletin that the largest increase has been for seniors. The last 15 years, a 700% increase in seniors abusing opiates in deaths. That's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah. It's lower than the general population, but that's where the steep increase is.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Actually, it shouldn't increase that as much, because as you get older, you don't metabolize the drug as well as you did, and you'll get higher drug levels because you won't excrete it as much.
I'm only
And,
going by the numbers, and it could very
Interesting.
well be that some of them just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, you have to, when you prescribe, they have doctors that specifically are for geriatric patients, because they require different prescribing habits than you would a normal 20-year-old. So like you'd go to a geriatric type doctor, Joe.
I'll be waiting in line behind you.
Brian, anything else on the goals?
This is just a few, and they told us between 3 and 10 would be max. Still working on the goals for this fiscal year. We still have 6 months to go on some of the other stuff we started working on. I think this is a few things to target for next year. We can add to this as we see fit. But this is just what me and the staff came up with. And we want to add it in there and put it in the annual report.
Good job, thank you.
Where do we have a goal? I know we've talked about housing.
That's in this year.
Is that in here? Is that?
This starts next year,
Oh, this
or this
FY19.
coming July, FY19.
Okay.
So these are some things we're going to start this coming spring and through next year. But we're still working on the rental housing thing. I've got some stuff drafted. I haven't gotten buy-in yet from upstairs. I have mentioned it a couple times. I'm going to bring it up and start making a push for it this spring.
I mean, a couple of years ago, we all talked about a list of priorities. Tom, when you asked each of us to come up with the priorities to present to the selectmen, we gave you, there were a lot of priorities, and the department can only do so much. I mean, there were a lot of priorities to look at, and you get to them as you can get to them.
Well, there are wishes, and then there are priorities.
Correct.
Priorities come before wishes.
Well, although the department can only do so much, I know that, for example, I.CALL and the work that she's done and with seniors at the senior center is very, very much appreciated. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Good feedback I've gotten from people there.
Caroline, this is your flyer, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, thanks.
Seriously, I wish I had a red star, because I saw this, this flyer that went around. just right on. The various food groups, I mean, wow, you must have been a good student.
It's clip art.
Yes.
I thought it was great.
Good job.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know, you get a red star for that one.
Gold star.
Gold star.
Gold star.
That stands for
Oh,
yes.
What is it? No, a gold star. Oh, whatever the color star is. Thanks, Frank. There's no collusion. Okay, the only thing I wanted to say about the goals is this, those priorities that we talked about over the last couple of years, they're still there and they're still in front. The housing program Tom mentioned.
Yep.
The body art redo, I saw Brian has it on his desk, and I'm going to come in next week and see if we can get some help there. Joe might be able to come in as part of the, what's that program you're on? Where you do so many hours in various departments?
Oh, that's the tax
Tax abatement.
write-off here
Okay,
in North Andover, offered to 60 seniors
Yeah.
a year, wherein they can write off up to, I believe it's $1,100 from the real estate tax by putting $100 of service, providing $100 of service.
so Joe might be able to come in too, so we can get this body art
Sure.
done and off the list.
That'd be great.
So, what? Nothing? You can talk? Okay.
You sure?
So, that's, Brian, anything else under new business, or is that?
That's it.
That's it, okay. Why don't we go to the, really, last thing would be department reports, and then I'll ask if anyone has anything else they want to contribute.
These are just for you guys. If you guys want to just read through them, this is pretty much what we've done as a staff the past, say, 3 weeks. And so obviously my report's first, Michelle's is second, and Caroline's is in there as well. If you guys have any questions, I'm not going to read through every single bullet item, but just for you guys to take a look at and read through. And it'll be part of the minutes and the
Yeah.
package online as well.
Just a comment on Michelle's report, that many of the trash truck companies haven't been permitted, including JRM, who does our pickups, Northside, who does our recycling, many others. I guess
We've been working with some of these companies to get them permitted. They always wait until the last minute, of course.
Yep.
So police have been out there enforcing. They've pulled over about a dozen trucks already.
Okay.
We've got multiple phone calls from the companies. What do we need to do?
Okay.
So,
All right.
yes, and there's a bunch of companies that actually have permits waiting to be picked up. They just haven't picked them up yet.
Okay.
They're too heavy to mail. They're bundles of stickers and stuff, so.
So they've actually given out fines then?
Warnings so far.
Warnings so far.
Fines will come next. We usually give them,
A little grace period.
yep, we'll give them a little wake-up call.
Well, it's still 1st of January, but
Exactly.
18th of January.
we're all big
Still the
boys. so
first
I
month
mean,
out of 12.
I mean, I renewed my licenses, I mean,
I know.
all right.
Brian, last month you talked about you were having a big meeting with Royal Crest, I think?
Yes,
that?
comprehensive inspections with inspection teams. We've done 2 full buildings so far. We've got 48 more to go.
But didn't you say there were several department heads were going to have a
Yes.
sort of a grand scheme meeting with them of the big picture plan?
We did, and we actually started doing what they call them comprehensive inspections. Police, fire, building, health, planning, zoning, conservation all go out, and we're doing systematic inspections of all the buildings and every single unit in every single building. So this is a whole, not a year-long project, but close to it. We're scheduling 1 day a week with all the departments to go out and do 1 full building inspection. Takes a few hours,
How many buildings altogether?
like 50.
Yeah, it's a big place.
So this is just to set a baseline, go through every building and every unit, and anything that's in violation or out of code has to be fixed. And that started 2 weeks ago. So we've done a building last week and a building this week. So those are going to keep going throughout the entire year until all of them are done.
Anything from our end that came up that needed to be addressed?
Basic housing stuff.
Okay.
Broken windows, some leaky faucets, some ripped screens, stuff like that. Your typical standard apartment issues. Nothing major yet. Nothing in terms of holes in walls or flooding, chronic dampness yet. I'm sure we'll run into that soon.
Now, between Merrimack College and Royal Crest, they have that new light. Students or whomever is crossing the road, I believe they push the button, and then when it turns red, they cross. But you really can't see that well there at all. And it's, I'm not saying it's an accident ready to happen, but it's leaves much to be desired. Certainly better than it was before.
Better than it was before.
Because there's nothing there before, but.
Dodging cars.
Two things. We'll get all this online like a couple days before the meeting, or as early as Brian and Tony can get it out on the reports, and also the various handouts for the meeting, so we can review it and then have the hard copies at the meeting, so we'll have more of an idea. So I'll just let you know, that'll be happening. And also, Caroline, I was going to ask you, I don't remember, are we stocking the herpes vaccine, or?
Not right now, so we have, we're trying to figure out budget and what the demand, and I know there's definitely a need out there to have it. However, I think we were just trying to figure out, we ended up stocking both pneumonia vaccines, and now they're coming out with the new shingles vaccine, but it's not really reimbursable at this point.
Oh, it's not, okay.
No, so we're still kind of.
Yeah, we had that conversation with Debbie several years ago. It's an expensive, both of those are expensive vaccines to purchase, and they don't tend to have a long shelf life, is that correct?
The pneumonia and the shingles?
Yeah.
Or, yes, so the pneumonia we just got, so there's the Prevnar and the Pneumovax, and we just ordered both of them and have them both now in stock because there was a lot of interest. I think when flu season comes around, everyone starts asking about the pneumonia vaccine, and shingles now, they have a new vaccine, so that one, they're both very expensive, and the Zostavax needs to be in the freezer, and we don't really quite have the right type of freezer right now, so we're looking at, hopefully this year, getting a new refrigerator and freezer system for the vaccines, but yes, it's also something we were trying to figure out budget-wise for the shingles.
I don't remember this, but with the Pneumovax and Prevnar and everything else, people that have had previous inoculations for pneumonia can still now get the new vaccines?
So with the Prevnar and the Pneumovax, it depends on when they got it. So say you got the Pneumovax before you were 65, once you turn 65, you should be getting the Prevnar, and then a year later getting the Pneumovax again. So basically, if you have received the Prevnar and the Pneumovax after 65, then you are all set.
You're all set,
for life.
okay.
Yeah. So it really kind of depends on which one you received and when you received it in regards to your age.
Okay.
And what if you really don't know?
So some people say, well, I had one vaccine, but I don't know which one it was.
Yeah.
I mean, for some residents, I have done a little investigating. I've called their PCP. I've found out what they've had. I think you can kind of err on this side of caution where you just, if they know they've had one, or say they said, I got it 10 years ago, because Prevnar, I think, only came out like 7 years ago or something like that. So if they said, oh, I got one, it was 10 years ago, they probably got the Pneumovax, so then they would need the Prevnar. So you kind of have to do a little investigating and see if there's anything out there, see if you can kind of get in touch with
It's like a
them.
13 and a 23.
The Prevnar 13 and the Pneumovax 23.
Okay.
Yep.
So even if, say, you err in saying, yeah, I got one shot or the other, and then you was given a shot that perhaps you shouldn't have been given, is that going to cause you any problems at all? No.
Not that I've read. I think it's more just of
Won't
how
be
the
as
vaccine
effective.
works. Yeah, exactly.
But,
It's the sore arm.
okay.
Sore.
General question, strictly general. The flu vaccine hasn't worked as well as it should have for the whatever the strains they chose
Right.
didn't work out too well. Generally speaking, in town, how many people have, because I know it's a reportable type thing, have you had
It is.
reports in general?
I've had two very close reports.
No, just generally
No,
speaking.
I think there's been, from what has come across my desk, maybe about 12 or 14
You have,
in
okay.
North Andover. And then I know there are definitely more in North Andover that haven't quite come across my computer screen.
Okay.
So, I mean, and then there are people who don't actually get, those are just the positive tests.
Okay.
So someone could be told they don't have the flu, they don't get tested for the flu, or they don't even see their PCP and they have flu-like symptoms and they probably have the flu. And, you know, so there's probably a
Probably
lot
tremendous
more.
underestimation. I mean,
Exactly.
very few people probably get tested for.
Right. Unless you're married to a nurse and you say, go get tested.
Generally speaking.
Right, so a lot of people just kind of self-treat at home and they don't go get, you know, seen, but, so.
Do our members of the audience have anything they'd like to say, or are you here on a research project, or as part of what happens at a Board of Health meeting?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for coming, I really appreciate it. Does any...
Discussion.
What's that?
Brief discussion item.
Yes, discussion.
Just a brief discussion item. I saw something that I thought might be interesting to people, and I will promise to take less than a minute discussing it. But one of the things that I do in my other life is colorectal cancer screening. And one of the things that's come out recently is people under the age of 50 who don't meet the guidelines for screening are showing up with colorectal cancer. And it turns out that this has always been something that's happened. The guidelines aren't perfect. It doesn't pick up everybody. But it seems that there's a dramatic decrease in the cancer death rate in the over 50 population. In fact, it's been estimated that 10 million lives have been saved because of intensive screening over the last 10 years. But what we have also seen, and nobody knows why, is people under the age of 50 are presenting with colorectal cancer at a higher incidence than it should be expected. And so I ran into this thing from the literature. It's one of those summaries. I don't have all of the background data, but it talks about screening people under the age of 50 and what the evidence is. So there's lots of different ways to screen. There's a DNA test, which is Cologuard. There's a colonoscopy, which is what I do. And then there is testing for hidden or occult blood. And the first generation tests were something called a guaiac test. A guaiac test is it's a chemical test that tests for peroxidase activity, which is in blood, but it's also not in only human blood, it's in animal blood. So if you eat a big juicy steak and you don't digest it, it transits quickly, it could show a false positive. And the same thing for certain vegetables, like horseradish has high peroxidase activity. So if you had a lot of shrimp cocktail before you did the test, it would show up positive. It might be a false positive. So one of the big improvements in the last several years is something called the FIT test. And the FIT test is for fecal immunochemical test, and it's highly specific. It's very highly sensitive to human blood. And so this test actually looked at people under the age of 50, and they did 4 different age groups. They did ages 30 to 34, they did ages 35 to 39, 40 to 44, and 45 to 49. And what they did is they got 20,000 people approximately in that group, and then they matched them to a group of controls who were about 2,000, ages 50 to 59, at average risk for colon cancer. And what they did is they did fit testing on these groups. And they found that if you had a positive fit test, which means that you showed blood in the stool, that's an abnormal finding. They found that in the control group, age 50 to 59, 3.8% of them had advanced polyps or cancers. An advanced polyp would be a polyp greater than 10 millimeters, or it has certain features under the microscope that are called dysplastic. So that's the control group, age 50 to 59, 3.8%. So they looked at the 30 to 34. If they had a positive fit test, they found that actually 2.9% of them had advanced neoplasia. So something that you wouldn't want to be carrying for a long period of time, because that might develop into cancer. When you went to the age 35 to 39 group, it was up to 7.4%. And then the 40 to 44 was 9.7%, and then the 45 to 49, it was 7.7%. So their conclusion was, is that if you're 35 or older, you may want to look at getting a fit test as part of your routine healthcare screening. And it's a cheap test. I actually looked it up on Amazon. You can buy it for $25. If you get it through your doctor's office, you could probably get it under your health insurance screening benefit. So for people who are 35 and older, it may make sense to get fit tested. And if it's positive, it seems that you might have approximately a 7 to 10% chance of having an advanced polyp or a cancer. So that's the finding. I think there'll be more to come from this. So hopefully I did that in about a minute and a half.
Wow, you can take longer. I got
Anyway.
a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate between that and somebody that has active ulcerative colitis or something like that? They're
Well,
going to show positive, probably.
Well, I think that I think what you're getting at is why was the control only 3.8% and the younger people were higher? And I think that has to do with risk, because you're grouping all risk here, and you're only grouping the lower risk patients here.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, as you get older, you're more likely to have things like hemorrhoids that can give you a false positive test. So anything that bleeds, if you have a fissure, if you have a hemorrhoid, if it bleeds, it's going to give you a false positive. Well, it's a true positive, truly, but it's not testing accurately what you're looking for, which is a growth, or a precancerous growth, if you will, or an early cancer, if you will.
The screen finds the blood, and then you have to differentiate the
You have
reason for the blood.
Then you have to do the next test to take it further. But the screen is an ideal screening test for a disease that's prevalent in the population, that you have a cheap and easy applied test to give. And what you're doing is you're just trying to find people. It's the same thing when you do a drug screen. Somebody comes into an emergency room, they have you pee in a cup, and you might test positive for cocaine and all sorts of awful things. But the thing is, you actually have to do a second test to confirm that it's really there, because there are things in the diet that you can eat that can turn those things false positive. So the screen is just a quick, dirty look to see, hey, does this thing need more scrutiny? So, but it's a cheap way to do it, and according to published evidence from a peer-reviewed journal, the age of 35 seems to be an inflection point where if you're 35, it probably is worth your while to have it done. And then when you turn 50, you can take other options. But it was really it was eye-opening to me. It really caught my attention. I thought it would catch people's attention as well.
Yeah, wow. Have you had any of your patients come in from a positive fit test?
Yeah.
All
All the time.
You do? Okay.
All the time. I get it's one of my most common referrals. Somebody comes in just for a positive fit test, and many of them have positive findings. You do find something.
Wow.
Now, not necessarily an advanced neoplasia, but some neoplasia, maybe a small polyp, maybe not at very high risk, but it's a highly accurate test that if it's positive, you really can't ignore it. You really must take it to the next level.
Unless
And you don't repeat it again, because if you got one positive, that's all you need.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess unless they have other known factors like some inflammatory condition that'll cause breakdown in
Well,
blood.
those are not the people that you're going to screen. They already have a
They
high
already have
prevalence of
problems.
disease. They need to be screened more intensely.
Okay.
This is just for somebody walking off the street saying, hi, I want an annual physical.
Wow.
And I'm not having any symptoms. So,
And I've stated in the past, as all of you know, I have had colon cancer. And I'm telling whoever's listening right now, get tested. You end up with colon cancer, it is awful. The chemotherapy was for 26 weeks, and what they did is they put a little port with some kind of line going directly into your heart, and they inject, it was called 5-FU and Lecavorn. It's a poison. It goes primarily for the cancerous tumors, but it goes for other tumors too. And chemotherapy, you just get so sick. They took me off it 3 times because I just unraveled. It was awful. So I missed 3 weeks, and near the end of that second week that I had missed, I felt pretty good. And then I went back for more chemo, and it was this get that colonoscopy, I tell you, don't take a risk. how many people you say have been saved? 10 million people over the last 10 years?
10 million people, yeah.
Good Lord. You just can't put into words how bad this chemo is. It just,
Annual case incidence is 150,000 new cases every year, according to the American Cancer Society.
I lost about 40 pounds.
Yeah.
We don't want to go there.
I'm done. I'm done.
Anyway, I just thought that would be interesting for people to hear. It was news to me. I hadn't known that.
That
Stumbled upon it.
That was really interesting, thank you.
It's good.
That was really good stuff to know. Wow.
Yep.
Anyone have anything else they'd like to bring out or discuss? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
You're adjourned.
Virgin?
We're adjourned.
Good meeting.
Excellent. Then you get the sign.